If you enjoy My Comic Shop History, please consider joining the My Comic Shop History Patreon community. Rewards include bonus episodes, the My Comic Shop History After Show, and more. Your pledge gets you exclusive access to that content and also supports the creation of this show. Thank you to everyone who has already pledged. I truly appreciate it. And if you haven't pledged yet, don't be a flat squirrel. Welcome to Beyond My Comic Shop. I am your host, Anthony Desiato. This is part 2 of Buying Books with Ben, featuring Zapp Comics co-owner Ben Lichtenstein. Ben, welcome back.
Hi, Anthony. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So last time we talked about your secret origin as a reader and a fan, and then a buyer and seller of collections. Mm-hmm. And when last we spoke, we finished with a bit about your experiences as a dealer at conventions. And this was still pre-Zapp Comics, but Zapp Comics would come not too far after, right? Correct. There was an intermediary step where you had a part-time store at an indoor flea market.
That's right.
Right? How did that come to be?
Okay. I was in college. I attended Rutgers University from 1988 to 91. I was selling comic books at that point in time. I was selling them in the Comics Buyer's Guide. I was running ads in Comics Buyer's Guide as well as doing comic book conventions. And it was going fine. I wasn't making a ton of money, but I was making enough money that I don't think I still worked a little bit at my job at Haagen-Dazs. But in the back of my mind, once I entered college, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, it would be really cool to have a comic book store as a business. In the back of my mind, I've always been torn between, pursuing like writing and art, and the whole owning my own business and commerce. So, the way the part-time business came about was I joined a fraternity at Rutgers, which was very unlike me. I was totally out of character, but I did it, and it was well worth it. It was crazy. And one of the fraternity brothers was into comic books and other stuff like baseball cards, and he didn't have as much knowledge as I did about the old comic books. And he says, "Hey, they're building this new indoor flea market. It's a brand new thing, and they need vendors. Since we both like comics, let's sell comics there." And this guy who approached me, we got along fine. We weren't best friends, but we got along fine. And he was a hard worker. He was a hustler too. He always had a million jobs and was always buying and selling stuff. So I knew he was a hustler, and I trusted him, and I still do. I trust him. So I said, "Yeah, sure." I said, "That sounds like a good idea," because I was doing okay with my Comics Buyer's Guide ads and shows, but it was inconsistent. I figured, well, if we have something every week, instead of having to get a part-time job somewhere, we'll do that. So we did it. So it opened up, and we signed a lease and had rent, and that was a really great learning lesson too, because that gave me practice on a small scale about having a store.
That's actually a really smart way to go about it. I mean, even if you didn't have the idea yet to have your own full store, but to at least, have that experience under your belt, that makes a lot of sense.
It really made a lot of sense, and that's not to, diverge too much here, but I think a mistake that most people, not just comic books, but most entrepreneurs make, they kind of dive into a business without first maybe doing it on maybe a part-time basis or working for someone else for a while and really learning the business first. And I think that actually is why most of them fail, because I know so many people, they say, well, I'm going to start XYZ business, doesn't matter. And it happens in comic books all the time. And yet they haven't really, I always advise everyone who wants to get into comic books, just do it for a couple of years first and get that experience and that pain and those lessons. Do it part-time. Do shows, do eBay, sell them on Facebook and Instagram. I think it's really a major mistake just to open a comic store without years of experience, because you're going to make so many mistakes, and then they're more expensive mistakes.
I'm sure it's different for each person in each case, but I mean, I wonder generally, is it a naivete or a laziness or maybe fear? Like they're worried if they know too much, they might not want to do it. And am I convinced them otherwise?
You know what's interesting? I think all three of the things you said are all apply. And I think a big part of people that go into business, and I could even apply this to myself in some way, it's a way to stave off growing up. It's a way to stave off that like stress and, kind of bigger responsibility of actually having a full-time job and real responsibility. And it's something... It's just like people that are like working on a book. Like I know this guy, he's a nice guy, but he's been working on a book, quote unquote, for like 15 years now. And it's a way to say you're working on something when you're really not, and you're just like putting off making a hard decision, which is to get a job or really just admit the book's not going to work. So I agree with you on all three of those points.
So what were some of the lessons that you took away from the part-time store?
Well, we learned really fast not to focus entirely on price, because what had happened was, which was a great lesson. I learned a lot there. That was great. At the same time that we signed a lease to have a comic book store there, and then we open up and we see there's another comic book store literally across the aisle from us, and we got really angry at the landlord. Say, listen, this is going to hurt us. We're just going to hurt each other. And then those guys. At first, we were really angry, and we're like, okay, well, they're the enemy, and we're at war with them. And then they would try to steal our customers, and then they would run over to our store and buy something from us just to get it for for their customers, so they wouldn't come to. And it was one of those annoying, cutthroat situations. I learned really fast. This is dumb. This is just hurting both of us. So I instead. After the first few months where it was a little bit heated between us, I just made friends with them. I forget what I don't remember the word to you, but I said, listen, I'm not going to do it to you. You don't do it to me. We're both into comics. Let's just do our own thing, I said. And that's exactly how I've approached almost everything I've done since then. And I had a bad situation, just to jump ahead. In like 2002 or 2003, I had two comic stores open, one right in Wayne. He was a new guy, very naive, not a businessman. He didn't do it with any malice, but he opened in the same town as me. And I kind of said to him, I said, why would you do that? I'm not going away, and it's only going to hurt both of us. This is not good. And then I had a former customer, a real shady guy. He was always, when I wasn't there, he would try to convince the workers to sell him variants at a real shifty guy. He opened up a mile and a half away from me. And I was stressed out from that, major stressed out. That was one of those times I wasn't sleeping well for like a year, because and also business was bad. This was a downtime. But I learned I'm not going to fight on price. The guy that was shady, who wound up he screwed all his partners, owes everyone money. He was giving people like 30 to 40% off just to win them over from me. And I said, I know this guy's going to go out of business. It's simple arithmetic. So, but I learned from that, that part-time thing, not to get into like cutting throats. You only cut your own throat. You compete on, service and price and selection. And if they win, then they win. But it's like a race to the bottom. Well, that guy gave you 30 off, I'll give you 35. Those kind of buyers are never loyal anyway. Those are the worst customers. The guys that'll jump ship for like that extra 5%, they're the worst. So don't even engage with them. Okay, bye, And as my saying goes, go away.
Yes, a callback to part one.
Yeah.
I'm just curious what the responses were from those people. So at the flea market, for example, when you went over and you made peace, I mean, were they receptive? Did they honor, what you agreed upon?
Yeah, pretty much. They were actually, it turned out that they weren't bad guys at all. They were kind of like us. They were just regular, normal dudes. They just thought it'd be cool to have a comic book stand. I bump into two of them quite often at Comic-Cons even now. They're not in the business, but, and they stop and chat, and we just talk about the old days, and it's very friendly. So we just kind of agreed just to coexist. And then they left fairly soon. Like we lasted 2 years, and then I graduated college, and that was it.
Was it like a booth?
Yeah.
What was it called?
It was called, now you're ready, this is very creative, Ben and Mike's Comics.
Well, it's to the point. Gets the job done.
Yeah. It was obviously not my finest hour in creativity, but and their booth was they actually had a name. Oh, I don't remember it now. Like I don't know, like the third dimension. Right? So, like
Something comic-esque.
Comic-esque, right? But I still run into two of those guys, and we talk about it, and it was fine. But I learned immediately is to, if someone is your enemy, just to not engage. Just do your best just to like totally disengage. Don't even waste any effort on it. And the guys that are kind of your rivals or a competitor, just be kind of neutral or friendly.
Right.
Because you're not going to gain anything by going to war. Because when those, to jump back ahead to like 2003, when those two stores opened up, I was stressed out, man. It was bad. That was one of those time periods I talk about, which, I look back on and that gets me out of bed in the morning. Because the one guy was actively after me, like trying just to steal all my customers. And the other guy was just a naive, kind of just didn't know any better and was hurting himself. And he wound up closing up and with like $100,000 in debt. And so he hurt himself as well.
Right. Well, it's a tough thing because even if you recognize the failings of those owners and those stores and you figure, well, they're not going to be around that long, still, for however long that they're there, I mean, they can do damage.
A lot of damage. And I knew they would both not last. One wouldn't last because he was selling it. He had a bad location. He was selling everything at, basically, he was losing money with every sale. I knew that. So he would run out of money. The other guy I knew wouldn't last just because even though he was not a bad guy, he didn't have a business sense and he didn't have a good location. And he was just doing everything wrong. Like I can walk into a store and talk to a guy for about a half an hour and look around the store and I know they're doing a lot wrong. They're going to fail. Right. Probably.
The naive guy, when you went over and said, hey, like, why would you open up here? What was his response?
He said he didn't.
He says, you're doing well. I figured it's a good place for comics.
I'm sure. I have a feeling in his mind that was what was on his mind because I had been around for like 10 or 11 years by then. He figures, well, Zapp's making money. There's a good area. He kind of said, oh, yeah, I figured Wayne's a big town. Like he said I don't remember. It was like a throwaway comment. Like he wasn't confrontational actually. He was just like, oh yeah, I just kind of figured there was room for everyone or something like that. And I'm like, this is bad. I said, because I'm not going away. This is my livelihood, and now it's only going to hurt both of us, man.
I mean, on this note of confrontation, and I know you said, going back to your strategy for, buying and selling books, and, if something's not working right, like you won't engage. Mm-hmm. But I guess how do you, if you're in the middle of a negotiation and it's not going the right way for whatever reason, and someone's just rubbing you the wrong way, how do you disengage from something like that? What is your strategy?
Well, what I usually do is here. I'll give you an example. Last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, I got a phone call from a gentleman in Staten Island, and he was a perfectly. I'm not going to say anything negative about him. He's perfectly polite, but he came off on the phone as, I'm going to say, kind of rough around the edges, and to the point where I probably what wasn't going to go down for the collection. But he called me a couple more times. He gave me a little more information, and he had a couple key issues I wanted. But I just had a good feeling he was going to be hard to deal with. And I was right. I got to his house, and we go down his basement. And, we start going through each book, and he was one of those guys. There's a lot of these guys who now flip books on Instagram and Facebook, and they often buy from me, and then they flip the book to someone else, and they're usually very hard to buy from because their grading is totally off. So right off the bat, they think it's a 9.2, and it's an 8.0, and already you're off. And secondly, they're always on the they're always trying to get the top price possible, maximum price. They have to feel that they won. Okay. So I go down with this guy, and our agreement was I would buy his bulk, his cheap stuff. But I said, I'm not coming to Staten Island just for that. It's just only a few $100s. I said, you have to have a better, it's not worth the trip for me. I said, I have to buy better stuff. So my time, I was very upfront with him. So my time is, well spent. He goes, no problem. I have at Hulk 181, I have this and that. We'll make a deal on those too. I said, okay, so just so you know, I'm not going to buy the bulk unless we are able to make a deal on some better stuff as well. Not all of it, but something. And he agreed to that. And I realized as we're going through the books that it was going to be like a war. Every book, it was going to be like in his mind, he has to win this bargaining session. So I almost just left. But then I said to myself, I really want that Hulk 181. And I said, I got to make this work. So what I did, I let him win on a few, meaning I made very marginal money. And then there was a few he let me win a little bit. And then once we agreed on a few, it was just like on American Pickers, they break the ice, you know what I mean?
Sure.
It was that. And this is stuff I don't enjoy, actually. This is when I have to put on my, like, what's the word I'm saying? My, like, chess, like I'm playing chess, which I don't enjoy this, actually, having to figure out how to play this guy so I can walk away with my Hulk 181. But I had it, and I did it. And I know how to do it, because certain people have to feel that they won. And as long as you could let them win some and you get what you want, everyone can somewhat. And he was very, and at the end, we were actually, it usually works out that once you break the ice, they let down their guard. He was very guarded. It actually worked out fine, and he helped me load him up, and he was like, thanks for coming. And he was totally fine. It was fine. But like, the point is, sometimes when it's someone that's just going to be impossible, I just say, look, I think we're far apart. That's my phrase. I think we're really far apart here. Why don't you get some other offers? And I'll actually give them names of other buyers, because let them handle it, right? And then sometimes when there's a customer in the store that's just a real pain, it's just has to feel that he has to always get a deal off me. I just say, I kind of do the same thing. I send him to other stores. I say, listen, I don't think it's going to work. I can't sell them for those prices. I think you want stuff wholesale. Here's a list of stores. Go to them. And that usually does a trick, because I'm kind of, in a polite way, saying, get out of the store.
Right. I mean, do they recognize that? And are they put off by that ever?
Probably. I mean, some of them, some people are just very not self-aware, and they have an ego, and they're also just focused on, like, I'm going to win, in this negotiation. But some of them absolutely see it immediately. I go, wow, this guy's just throwing me. He's telling me he doesn't even want my money. He wants me to leave. In a polite way, in the right way. I say, listen, I think it's best if you shop with, if you could go to that store in Fairlawn. And because I know that guy's not going to take any of this crap, and he's going to throw him out of the store too. So some of them recognize it. It's rare I actually have a confrontation, like a heated one, because I'm really very careful, as you know already, knowing me now. I'm very careful about just like having a very, professional, calm, friendly, presentation here. And I don't like arguing. But I've had a couple, I've had a few over the years where they were ridiculous, they were obnoxious, they were treating my employees poorly. That I don't stand for one bit. You got to get out of here. It's not going to work. Shop somewhere else.
On the note of negotiating with these sellers, I think this is something we'll kind of keep touching on over the course of these episodes. But one thing that I was curious about, generally speaking, do you find that people are aware? Well, not aware, but do they really recognize that you are a store? You're not just a collector buying something for your collection, so that you need to make a profit on this. So if they have a sense of, it's worth this much, do they recognize that you're not going to pay what it's worth? Because presumably you're going to be selling it for what it's worth, so you need to pay less for it. Otherwise, what's the point? Like, are they aware of that? I mean, how often do you have to educate people on how you're... Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I would imagine.
Something we run into a lot, which I'm sure almost every dealer and store owner does who buys comics, people will want to feel that they did their research online. As well, everyone should. You're buying a house, a car, you should do your research, right? But they always look at these websites. Like there's one called comicpriceguide.com. There's one called Comic Book Realm or something. There's probably like a dozen of them that are price guides. And they're based on nothing. They don't have it broken down by grade. The prices are not real market prices. And it gets frustrating. Thirdly, they look on eBay listings, not the sold listings. I'm so sick of saying, click on sold listings and then look at the ones in green that have sold on eBay. That's a much better idea of the market. That's what someone really paid. And I'll tell you, I'm exhausted from saying it. I've said it like 10,000 times. Because people will say, you offered me $150. This is $1,000. I go, no. And then I explain to him, I go, well, it's on consignment on mycomicshop.com for $1,000 because someone just threw a price out there. No one is going to ever pay that. We'll both be long gone for him. It's worth, and then I show them sold listings, sold for $2.25. I'll sell it for $2.50. I'll give you X amount. Some people also think that comic books are like a stock or a bond that's traded on like some exchange, and it's worth $11. Give me 10 or something. It's really. Then I say, well, no, you got to realize I have 10 of these already, and I get these all the time, and I have to cover my overhead and blah blah blah. And so I can pay you 5, and this is also a common issue. You can see actually I'm starting to get like a little wrought up here. It gets frustrating. Usually though I'm able to educate them pretty quickly. And I think that's something I try to do at least. I try and come across as straightforward as possible. I look them in the eye. I explain this is why I'm doing this is why I'm doing that. And I would say probably 90% of people come around and I also really say, listen, get some other offers. And because sometimes they'll want such a high price. I'm like, listen, here's what I advise. I think we're really far apart. Maybe get some other offers. Do a little research, and maybe we'll, and very often they come back, go, you were right, because I looked at that 9.8 price, and mine's fine. And then, see, that's the other problem is, too, they'll look at the 9.8 price. That's $500. Their copy's like a ratty copy that's worth $80. And you have to explain that. It gets a little exhausting, but I'm used to it. It's part of the business, and I just calmly do it. Most people are actually reasonable and kind of, take my words for what they are. And then sometimes you just get people that are just, like I said, ready for a fight. They're always looking for an angle. And it's usually because they're always angling.
Right. Yeah, I would imagine in a case where someone's just genuinely ignorant, like this isn't something that they've dealt with and they're aware of.
Absolutely.
Maybe it's easier to be patient with them versus someone who's looking to score. That's
exactly it. Like when it's someone who legitimately has never, like let's say they inherited their comics, or let's say they were, I don't know, like sometimes I get landlords will sell me stuff, like the tenant left their stuff behind. Usually it's not good, but anyway, that's a perfect. I understand their side of the table, because let's say when I go to buy a car, like I don't like to haggle. I kind of know what I want to pay. I do my research. I kind of know where I want to be. But I understand when I'm going to buy something that I have no knowledge of, there's a certain kind of nervousness and apprehension. You don't want to get taken advantage of, and it's all new to you. I'm very understanding of that, because I'm a human being and I got to buy stuff that I don't know about. So usually I'm patient with them. I understand it, and it usually works out okay.
Yeah, that was something else that I wanted to get into with you, as far as the different types of people that you're dealing with when you go to buy these collections. So in a case like that, or a relative or someone who's not knowledgeable about this, if they call you and you go over and they're like, I'll take $20. I don't care. Like, I just want to get rid of it, but it's worth far more. How do you handle that?
Okay, that's a very common. It's not a common thing. It doesn't happen much, but that's among comic buyers that's a big dilemma, because here's the thing. If you have any kind of ethics, if someone has a $100,000 comic collection and they say, listen, I'm throwing these away, whatever you give me, I'll take it. $50, I'll take it. You can't do that. Well, I shouldn't say that. You can do it. You're not legally obliged to pay them anything besides the $50. You can walk away. They set the price. I can't do that because, well, there's a few reasons. One is, if it's a drastic amount, like say they were going to give me for like 5%, I can't do it. First of all, it's just bad karma. I just feel icky about it. Secondly, I'm kind of taking advantage of their lack of knowledge. And third, it's going to give me a lot of goodwill, which is also why I get a lot of collections, because I built up this reserve of goodwill where I say, hey, listen, you have this box of comics. I told you I can buy these books for $30 a long box because they're 90s stuff. But you're basically at my mercy. You're putting yourself at my mercy. You're saying, Ben, I'm trusting you to give me a fair offer. I know you have to make a profit. Tell me if there's anything good in here. And then I'll pull out the new Minus 98 and I'll show them, and it builds up a lot of goodwill. And I'm gonna still make a very fair profit. I'm gonna pay them $125. I'll get $200 for it, probably $225. You're not legally obliged to do that. I know plenty of dealers, they get off on that. They get off on that score, on just totally raping. Now, I'm not going to say also, let's say I buy a huge collection and I buy it, the deal's done, I bring it back, and there was a few things mixed in. Unless it's something really drastic, I'm not going to call the person anyway, because there's two things that can happen. One is they get suspicious, actually. Well, wait a minute. Was he trying to rip me off and now he felt guilty and he's giving me more money? That's weird. I'm not doing that. And number two, there's usually something in collections that I missed on the negative side, like there's a missing page or something, and it's kind of a wash. I let it go. But what I've done many, many times, especially if someone just comes in here and says, listen, I don't know anything about comic books. You're the expert. You're in this business. I'm in your hands here. I want you to be fair with me. In that case, I'm going to tell them what they have. I still have to make a profit. I'm going to pay them a fair price. But it's happened many, many times where like it just happened last year. They had a Tales of Suspense 39. It was mixed in with a bunch of just mediocre books. And I could have very easily just kept that in the pile and gotten it for probably $10. Instead, I said, hey, this is a great one. And they actually took a picture of it, and they send me Christmas cards now and stuff, which is unnecessary, by the way. I don't need Christmas cards. I get a lot of them already. But I paid them, I think, $1,100 or $1,200. It wasn't high grade. I gave them $1,200, and they were excited. I think it was the kid's father had died. That also plays into my thinking, too. I think I said that in the last podcast. If someone's has a legitimate bad story, and they really need the money, I'm always going to be a little more generous. But so, you're not obliged to do that, though. And let's say I'm at a garage sale, and a guy has everything priced at $25, and there's a big book in there. I don't really have to give them any more. And if he's like a guy who's, it depends on this is what I do. If they're telling me, listen, Ben, I'm in your hands here. I'm going to trust you as the expert to give me a fair price. I really take that seriously, and I still make a profit though. I'm not going to pay him full price, but I know a lot of guys at that garage sale, they would just pay the $25. And honestly, if I was at a garage sale and it's like a guy who looks like he's an antiques dealer and he kind of knows his stuff, but he just missed on something and he has it stickered, I'm just going to buy it and forget it, because that guy already has set up a situation where he has his knife out in the situation. Like it's adversarial, whereas he's not saying, hey, look, Ben, you're the expert. Can you just tell me what's fair on these? I'll take your fair price.
Right.
But this is something that comes up all the time with dealers. Now, dealers a lot of dealers have a business of just going around to comic shows and finding the mistakes. And I miss stuff. Sometimes I just screw up. I price stuff too low and I miss. It's called finding the misses. And if someone's a dealer, it's kind of all's fair in love and war. If someone's a dealer and he just misgrades something or is not on top of the market, well, shame on him, But if someone is not a dealer and they're kind of putting their faith in you, you got to give them a fair price.
I think that's reasonable. How often, if at all, do people come to you just for an appraisal?
Not too often. Usually when they say an appraisal, they actually want to sell it, but they're just trying to be a little coy and don't want to make a mistake. So they don't want to tell me they want to sell it because they don't want to commit to anything. I do insurance appraisals. We charge a fee, and I'll do a written official appraisal. I do maybe one of those a year, and because someone needs it for a divorce or insurance, I do those. I'm really not in the habit of doing free appraisals just for random people, especially the ones that occasionally want me just to grade and price their books for them so they could in turn sell them themselves on eBay. I'm like, why would I do that? My time's valuable. Why would I help you sell them?
Right.
I need to get paid for my time, right? I get that maybe once a year where someone wants me to do that work so they could, listen, I want to sell these on eBay, but I don't know how to grade comics, so I want you to do it for me. I go, well, my time's really valuable. I'll charge you $100 an hour, and I'll do that. And they go, what? And I actually had a couple of people do it, actually. And I said, okay, because I'm getting paid for my time, I'll do that. But people don't do too many appraisals. Usually they want to sell, and you wind up buying it.
Going back to the issues of grading and price guide values, you mentioned a few sources that you don't subscribe to. What are resources that you will follow?
Well, one thing that is very valuable, which a lot of people use, and some are some of these buyers and sellers are not using it correctly, but there's a website called GP Analysis. And everyone in the business just says GPA. What's the GPA on that? Everyone says GPA. And what it is, they take sales data. And not everyone submits their sales data. Most of the bigger websites don't even give them their data. But they take data off eBay and a couple others, maybe Comic Link or Comic Connect, I'm not sure. So they show trends and they show real sold prices on CGC graded comics or CBCS, certified comics. So that's important on better books, like more valuable books. On less valuable books, say under $100, we look at eBay a lot. And on a lot of books, I'll just kind of figure it out between eBay, what I see people on, what people are going for. Because sometimes there's books that eBay's not catching up to it, or vice versa, or there's not data on eBay. Like there's a certain book, there's no data on it, and I just have to figure it out. But on bigger books, you absolutely have to use GPA. But then it starts getting fine tuned. It gets really granular. Like, let's say I have a Hero for Hire 192, okay, CDC 92. Last one went for 1,800, but now they don't tell. Did that one have cream to off-white pages? Off-white. Did that have good eye appeal? Was it centered? So then I got to look on eBay and Comic Link and Comic Connect. I see what stuff's going for, and my comic shop. The problem with my comic shop is they take stuff on consignment where the where the consignor sets the price, and the prices are ridiculous. Like they're way off. So you can't go by their prices on consignment stuff. But if you go on Comic Link, Comic Connect, Heritage, I go on Heritage, and there's a way to look at past auctions that can be helpful. There's also a site called WorthPoint, which collects data. That's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that being able to look back and see what has sold and at what price and at what grade is perhaps the most useful gauge for this. I mean, for something like GPA analysis, or the GPA, that's retailers self-reporting what they've sold.
Yeah, but it's not a complete listing. Like I said, probably 3/4 of retailers don't submit their data. So it's not a complete look, but it's good enough. And since so many people use it, it becomes valuable because everyone goes by it. But there's also certain books where I just feel that are undervalued or overvalued for that matter. So like let's say, for example, like the Inhumans, FF45. Which I bring up a lot because that one like skyrocketed and then crashed. Now it's creeping back up again. FF45, if I sense something softening up, like it's going cold, I'll price it cheaper, like in advance. Just sell it now before it drops even more. But then vice versa, I'll give you a book that's really skyrocketing. Amazing Spider-Man 14, First Green Goblin. That book, I can tell when a book is getting hotter. I get a lot of calls and emails about it and people requesting it. So that's a book. I actually have a couple now. I kind of put it away. I think it's going to keep going up. There's a lot of demand for it, and it's really tough for me to get it. Same on Amazing Spidey 3, Amazing Spidey 6. A lot of demand for those. I can't get them too much. So those, in essence, I'm going to price higher than GPA for that reason. But then you take a book like New Mutants 87. It's a relatively common book. I know there's a cable movie, whatever, but coming. That I'm going to go a little under GPA and just sell it because I know I could always get it again. I just got 2 last week, so I know I'll always get it.
And I know you've said that certain books that you feel are undervalued at the moment, you will stash those. You call those squirrels. Yeah.
Don't be
Flat
a flat
Squirrel
squirrel.
Productions. That definitely made an impression on me.
Yeah.
I mean, can you say some of the stuff that you have squirreled, or is that not for public consumption?
You know what? It's mostly books. There's no just one type of book. It's mostly books that are, say, older. Say it's like Bronze Age comics that are really not in favor right now. If for whatever reason those titles think that there's no Netflix or movie going on with them, but so they're really hard to. They're really cheap. So there isn't like a specific like first appearance. It's almost any. I'll tell you what it is. It's an older silver, usually Bronze Age book that has a first appearance in it. The character hasn't gotten any exposure, any hype, or it's a Bronze Age title, say like, I don't know, like Richard Dragon Kung Fu Fighter. I think like number 5 is First Lady Shiva or something, but otherwise it's a dead title. Stuff like that I'll put away because I figured they're cheap now. Why sell them now? I'll just put them away, and they'll probably get a mention in a movie, or the whole market will go up on them. But there's not one specific like, oh, I'm putting away all the first appearance of Bloodstone because I bet you they're going to make a Bloodstone movie. It isn't like that. It's just stuff that I really feel so cheap now. It just feels too cheap to me, and I'm just going to put it away and wait.
And do you find that often pays off?
It's paid off very well the past like 3 or 4 years because there's been such a flood of these new character appearances on all these TV shows and movies. So I've actually found a lot of stuff that like in my squirrel, it actually says the word squirrel on it, by the way, in my squirrel boxes where it was like $1 book, literally, and now it's like a $20 book. Like it happens, not all the time, but it happens enough that it's good.
It's funny. I said we were talking about the travel side of this. I think we'll get to that next time. This whole strategy and this whole piece of it is so interesting to me.
Good. Cool.
When it's a matter of, a character who's going to get a Netflix show or be in a movie, and there's heat because of that, who are typically the people who are asking for those appearances? Are they people who are fans of the movies and they just want it? Is it a collector who is buying it more for the resale value? Like, what do you typically find? Like, who's going after that stuff?
It's mostly there's three, pretty much, nothing exact. Pretty much there's three buyers. The smallest percentage, the fewest, are those fans of, like, say, the Walking Dead show, like people that are not comic people or fans of the Black Panther. We've been doing great with Black Panther comics for years now, and it's usually not hardcore comic people. It's people that are into anything African American. In fact, I have a good friend of mine, not a good friend, he's a buddy of mine in the comic world, who does these. There's certain trade shows that are only focused on Afrocentric stuff, and you could bring anything if it's related to Black culture, you can sell it there. So he comes by and he raids my boxes for any Black Panther and anything with Storm, Blade. Name it. If it's a Black character, he buys them up. So there's that small segment of those buyers. The bigger segment is just collectors who probably wanted that book. They wanted that first Inhumans and have been procrastinating, and now they hear a movie, now they're in a panic and I want to own it because they actually like the Inhumans and they like Fantastic Four. And then probably just as many, if not more, are these guys that are just into first appearances. They're more those, I call them more like flipper, speculator guys, that kind of guys who are into like buying the rookie cards of baseball players, thinking they're going to go up. Those are usually the guys that don't really love comics. They're into it for a few years because it's interesting, but then they don't have a real love for comic books, and it's fine, whatever they want to do, I don't care. But they just. And I shouldn't say, I'm not saying it's like a bad thing, but they don't like read. Here's what I'm saying is they haven't been reading comics for 20 years and have this real love for it. They just think it's cool to collect these things, and it's a piece of American culture, and it looks cool.
Going back to the grading piece of this and price guides, I don't think we mentioned Overstreet. Is that a resource that you utilize? And I know you are an advisor for them.
Yes. Overstreet is very handy as a reference. It has tons of good information. Pricing on it, just by its nature, is stale because now pricing is so dynamic, and pricing, everyone's on the internet and it changes daily, basically. But I do use Overstreet quite a bit because on most titles, I'm able to have a good feel for, well, if Overstreet is 12 and fine and it's a mid-grade Daredevil, I'm going to go $8. And we're not talking about the key issues. I'm just run-of-the-mill silver and bronze. I do use Overstreet, actually, and I discount it off. But on like Batman's, I go full Overstreet. On most Amazing Spideys, I get, well, not most, but I'd say most Amazing Spideys almost full Overstreet. But on titles like Thor, Daredevil, Iron Man, I just have a formula in my head. All right, well, it's 12 and fine. I'm going to price at $7 or $8. If it's 24 in VF, I'm going to go $18. So I do use Overstreet. And most books, though, in all honesty, I just price by myself, even without Overstreet. I just like bang it out. I know this is a $6 book, that's a $10 book, and I'm usually right. But occasionally stuff, creeps up that I miss, so I consult it.
Yeah, it's fascinating that, you've been doing this so long, and you started in an era pre-internet, so you only had those other resources before. Now, at least, there's, like you said, it's so dynamic, and you can keep up with these things as they're happening.
Yeah.
So what were those resources that you were using then in the beginning? Was it like an Overstreet?
Yeah, back then it was very much Overstreet. And then there was always a few dealers who were really sharp, and they would kind of figure out which books, which wasn't something I was into doing. I probably should have more. They would figure out certain books that they either just had a gut feeling or really had good evidence were undervalued for whatever reason, or certain books that they would really get, they would start buying them up and kind of almost create the market for. So some dealers would look at Overstreet, but then create their own market, which is really smart to do. Like, let's say you think House of Secrets 92 is undervalued. You buy them all up at Overstreet and you push the market up. I just never really got into doing that. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I think a lot of guys made a lot of money with that. But when I was dealing, it was Overstreet, and then there was something called Comics Values Monthly. I think that started in the late 80s, maybe. It was before Wizard. It was this magazine. It was like a Beckett guide for comics, CVM. That was always kind of crazy. You always looked at their price and would go lower. Like, they would take a hot book and be like crazy. And then, of course, we had Wizard.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because I was a young fan and reader, and I got Wizard, and I remember going through that price guide. What was what was your take on that?
Wizard was interesting because when I was doing shows in the 80s, the Seamus family had their comic shop, and when you saw the Seamus family come into the comic show, all the dealers were doing a little jig because they were spending really great amount of money, and they would buy from me and all the other dealers, and they would have certain books like Spider-Man vs. Wolverine with Ned Leeds, that one shot, and they would just buy them up at from all of us at 10 or 15, and they'd have them in our store at 25. And this is before they launched Wizard. Then they had a prototype of the Wizard Guide, and I still have mine. I got it, a little pamphlet, like a beige-colored pamphlet. That was their first prototype of a price guide, and it was very interesting. I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then obviously once the magazine hit, it was very similar to like that CVM where you would look at them hyping up top 10 hot books, and then there was always these conspiracy theories where the Seamus family would buy up all the Archer and Armstrong Zeros in June, knowing that they're going to pump it up in August in their magazine, which is, I don't know if they did that. I never saw it with my own eyes. Could they have done it? Yeah, I guess. So Wizard was interesting because it threw a lot of fuel on the fire, and it brought in all these speculators, a lot of speculators. And like I said, the guys that don't really love comics, guys that just want to, treat it as a commodity. That was very, very interesting, and they had a great product though. That was a great magazine. I thought it was like really beautifully done. It was pretty funny. Some of the columns, I thought were just funny and like well written, and but it did throw a lot of fuel on the fire with pricing. And I would never price right at Wizard unless it was something super that I knew was really good. It was always like, well, the Wizard says this, I'm going to go cheaper.
I was a big fan of Wizard, and I remember the first issue that I came across. I think it had Hulk on the cover, and it was at a Barnes & Noble. And, I guess the internet was around then, but not the way that it is now. And so, you didn't have as many opportunities to read about comics. And
sure.
I remember just being so struck by it. I'm like, this is awesome. It's an entire magazine devoted to comics and interviews and reviews and all kinds of stuff. So, no, I was a big fan. Towards the end, the magazine changed a lot, and I think it lost its way before the end. But there was a time where, I was a big fan of it. I was right there with you.
I enjoyed reading a lot, and I think the Overstreet, when I was a kid, but in the 80s, when the new Overstreet would come out, there was almost that same excitement because I would love to read all the market reports. Like all these dealers would write what's going on in their in their corner of the world, and then I would look at the ads, and then I would just study the prices. I was obsessed with it.
And then we were talking about grading. Something like CGC, that was something that I wanted to get your take on. I mean, generally speaking, how many books are you getting graded from them?
Well, what I do, I don't get as many books graded as other dealers for a couple reasons. One is I find that a lot of comics, I'll get the same, at the end of the day, I'll realize the same value as I would if I spent the money and waited 3 months to get it back from CGC.
And how much does it cost for grading?
It's a sliding scale. If you have just a modern, regular comic off the shelf that's worth like $50, they charge $20, but then they have a handling fee, And you also factor in, this is stuff I always factor in, unless you drop it off at a show and pick it up, you're going to pay shipping. You have to ship it to Florida and pay return shipping from Florida. That adds up, right? And then if you have more expensive let's say an example, let's say I have a Hero for Hire 1, it's worth $1,000. Then it goes in their standard scale, standard tier, and that's $60. And then so then you're going to be into it for $80. And then if you have a big book, like I just got an AF 15, Amazing Fantasy 15 graded, and they charge, which I kind of have a problem with this, they charge a percentage of the value, which to me is a conflict of interest. They're doing the same work.
Yeah.
Now, it's a conflict. Now, I have no problem charging more for an expensive comic because they have insurance costs. They have to check it more carefully. I don't mind a higher price, but when they go into charging a percentage of the value, there's a total conflict there.
Yeah, that seems like a little bit of funny business with that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I've never liked it. So, in other words, and like the Amazing Fantasy 15, I think it cost me about $340 or so to get it graded.
A book like that, are you mailing that, or you're dropping that off and picking it up at a show?
Well, I have shipped them. That I shipped. I shipped that in the Amazing one, and you ship it by registered mail and insured and everything. But I like to drop them off at a comic show. I prefer to do that. It just takes away that anxiety, right, of having to ship them.
So I guess then you're always doing that cost-benefit analysis of, is it worth it to spend the money to get it graded? Am I going to make that much more?
Yeah, well, exactly.
Being able to sell a graded copy.
Like very often, my analysis is if it's very valuable, and I just don't want a lot of people handling the book, having to show it to a buyer, and it's not protected. I'll get it graded just to kind of protect it. And also, if it's higher value, I get it graded so it's checked for restoration. I'm very good at picking up stuff, but something could slip by me. Doesn't happen much. So I also want to check for restoration. But a lot of times, let's say I have a book that's worth, say, like $500 to $1,000, like an Amazing 129. I'll usually just keep it raw, and I do the analysis. I figure out what I could get for it. I'm usually right on target, and I figure, I'm just going to sell it raw. And very often, what happens, someone would rather buy my Amazing 129 that I say is a 6.0, okay? They'd rather buy it from me and kind of maybe think and hope, maybe it's a 7.0. And like in their mind, I know that's in their mind. Well, maybe Ben undergraded it. It's possible. But once they know it's a 6.0, there's no more mystery. Like, all right, 6.0 is worth this. It's actually less appealing. It's more appealing when it's not graded on a lot of those books.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I guess that's, and again, I don't buy or sell any of these back issues. Like, I really don't have, other than working at alternate realities and seeing stuff come through. I mean, I don't really have much direct experience with this myself. And even among the guys at the store, there were other people who work there and shop there and were part of our community who were really into, the older books. And that was never me. Like, I enjoy it from afar, I guess. Like, it's just never something I've been into. But I was thinking about that, because I would imagine it does kind of take a little bit of the fun out of it.
It does. To me, getting stuff certified, it definitely has its place in the hobby. It's very useful, and I do get stuff certified. I don't do a lot of it, though. I do maybe a couple hundred a year, maybe 200 or 300 books a year, maybe, because very often I just find that to spend that extra money and also have the book tied up for a while, sometimes it takes 3 months to get it back. It's just better just to sell it here in the store. And most of my buyers would prefer raw. They say raw than CDC.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask if you find, are people coming in necessarily looking for that, or if they're just as happy to, buy it raw?
We find that our buyers, at least, are much more interested in raw books. And some of them I know want to get it cleaned and pressed, which I do some of that. I don't do it myself. I get some of that done. Clean. You get a book, but we just find there, even at shows too, we do much better with the raw books than CDC books.
I also have to think, for you specifically, you've been doing this so long, we've spoken about the reputation that you've built up. I feel like there probably is that feeling, especially among your regular customers. People have a feeling that they know what they're getting when you price and grade something.
Yeah, I think I would say 99% of my buyers now absolutely trust what they're getting from me. That if Ben has a price at 100, that's fair or even low. I just built up that reputation. And occasionally we have certain books. Most of my stuff I've talked about already. I turn them over. Occasionally stuff will sit around for like a couple months. Like I just had it happen. I had a couple early FFs, and I was at $125 on them. There's like a Doctor Doom with Ant-Man, which is really cool like that. But it hasn't sold. So I know everyone's seen it. I'm probably a little off on that. Like I saw that Ant-Man. I got excited. I made it a little like $10 too much. But in general, we sell tons and tons of books because we built up this trust that I don't overgrade my stuff.
And the last thing I want to ask you for this episode, you mentioned cleaning and pressing, and I know there are a number of those techniques that can, restore books. Just generally speaking, I mean, what is your feeling on that? Do you feel there's a place for it? Is it something that you're not as into?
Well, my feeling is it's something that's here to stay. Everyone's doing it now. It's just become part of the hobby. It's not, as far as cleaning and pressing, it's not considered a restored book.
Right, because there is such a range to this, right? So there's what on the lower end of the spectrum, cleaning and pressing, which is not even technically considered restoration?
It's not at all. It's just like, because basically when I say they, CGC, the certification companies have made a decision. It's not, you're not altering the book. It's when you trim something or color in something or take a chemical and clean something, the book's being altered. As far as they're concerned, when you clean something with there's all different techniques. There's like these erasers, like rubber erasers. You're just getting rid of dirt. It gives it a nice shine. And when you press it, you could get the same effect from just a book being squished in a box really tight. So they've decided it's not restoration. So it's not restoration. I don't mind it either way. I think it's getting a little crazy now where, I don't know, in general, this is just me being a little old-fashioned. I just really love comics, and it's just getting a little too granular, with people buying these books with it's a 9.4, and maybe we could press out that little dent, make it a 9.6. It starts to take away some of the fun.
Right.
But I can change it. That's the nature of the business, so it is what it is.
Cool. Well, Ben, I guess I'll let you go because I know you're off to do more collection buying. But I want to thank you so much for continuing to be part of this Beyond My Comic Shop miniseries.
It's my pleasure.
So during the time that we've been talking, the store open. It's busy, hopping on a Saturday. So if you hear some people in the background, you have customers already. It's funny, the first time that I spoke with you during My Comic Shop History Season 3, you set a record for the earliest recording, and today we broke it. We met even earlier today. Next time we might have to meet at 5. I don't know.
Well, one thing I've always done is I like getting an early jump on everyone. I really do, actually. I like getting an early start.
Yeah. Well, once again, thank you for being part of this.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, once again, I will say to be continued, and come back in 2 weeks for part 3 of Buying Books with Ben. Until then, just keep punching. Buying Books with Ben will be back in 2 weeks, but you don't have to wait 2 weeks for fresh Flat Squirrel content. Head on over to the Patreon page for the exclusive after show. My guest is none other than former Alternate Realities owner Steve Odo. It's the after show with SCO, only on Patreon.